I've got a pretty exciting day today. First I'm going to work, where I'm headed right now. Then I'm gonna go interview Jesse Israel, the founder of The Big Quiet in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And then I'm gonna go on a podcast called Catching Z's, where they actually recently interviewed MC Yogi and East Forest, who are a couple of musicians that I've been listening to for a while. We're gonna talk about Meditation Magazine. It's gonna be pretty cool. See what happens. Heading to the brass factory to interview Jesse Israel. To this point, and like how you got into all of this, into creating the Big Quiet Medi Club and that whole journey, which sounds fascinating to me from what I've heard of it. But first, do you want to just take a minute to just sit in silence, or do like a guided meditation if you want to lead it, or we could just sit in silence?
I'm cool. Yeah, just sit in silence for a moment.
Yeah, let's just take a minute to settle into here and now.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about it. This was, from what I've heard, you had a pretty successful music career, right? You were working with MGMT and bands like that, and now you've sort of transitioned somewhat, at least, into this life of being a leader in the meditation community. How did this all happen?
So when I was 20 years old and a sophomore at NYU, my roommate and I started managing the band MGMT. We had no idea what we were doing. I was a film student. But we believed in their music, and they were young guys making music out of Wesleyan College, and we felt called to do something about it. So we formed a dorm room record label to put out their first album, and went on this fun journey of just kind of messing up and learning by doing. And as the band grew, we started to kind of develop our ability to sign more acts and to have greater reach. Eventually MGMT upstreamed to a major label, and we started to just focus on signing more bands. And it was in my early 20s when I think the intensity of being full-time at college and also the intensity of running a essentially full-time business was starting to become quite overwhelming. So
David, over here, okay, behind me from over Mitchell. Sorry about that.
No problem. So I started to get hit with pretty debilitating anxiety and was starting to experience panic attacks, and really felt called to look into what I could do to better cope with what I was experiencing in my environment, in my world. And that's how I got into meditation. And I practiced for several years while also running the label, and we eventually at the music company started to invest in tech startups and sort of expanded into this new industry of technology. And it was this fun journey. But after about 9 years of doing it, felt like it was time to move on to do the next thing, and really can attribute my meditation practice to, I think, giving me the clarity and having that connection to my intuition and gut to know that it was time to move on, and also for the courage to act on it. I really felt like I was able to step into the unknown and leave that business and figure out what was next, in many parts thanks to my practice. And in my free time of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I started organizing group meditations with my friends. My buddy's loft in Soho, and it was great. The first one was about 20 of us. It was people from the music industry and the tech industries, and just kind of the places I was hanging out in the city. And it was all people who were interested in having a practice. They'd either been practicing for a short period of time or just learned. And it was a way for us to sit in quiet together, and regardless of what style of meditation people were practicing, they were welcome to come. And then after we would meditate, we would talk about the real things that were going on in our lives. And a lot of the themes that were coming up were around career and purpose, kind of making sense of what we're on this earth to do, and then getting real about the self-doubt and the social media comparison and challenges around money, and just kind of making sense of it all. And it was so refreshing to have space to be quiet and connect inward, and then to have those conversations and sort of connect outward. And Medi Club was born through that space. And And from there, as the community grew, it became more of a platform not only to meditate and to talk, but also to collaborate on projects, for people to get up and share, to do a performance, to say, hey, I'm working on something, does anyone else want to team up with me on it? And a real sense of community was formed there. The Big Quiet was born out of that after maybe 5 or 6 months, when we realized there was an opportunity to take those values and spread them with the rest of the city at large. And we did our first Big Quiet at Summer Stage Central Park. It was a partnership with the City Parks Foundation. And it was really cool to bring people together at a larger scale, and to have our meditation club, Medi Club, be the sort of organizing force behind that. It was a real collaborative effort. And it worked. The first Big Quiet was great. So since then, we've been continuing to host our monthly Medi Clubs. You were there a couple months ago. It's happening in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Williamsburg area. Similar format, just more people, a couple hundred people each time. And with the Big Quiet, we're still doing that as well. It's about quarterly, and we'll do them in iconic locations, gather thousands of people, have performances and special moments for connection and partying and celebration, DJs, good food and drinks. And we've been able to do them at places like Madison Square Garden, top of the World Trade Center, under the Blue Whale, Museum of Natural History. We just got back a couple months ago from a mass meditation tour where we brought the Big Quiet to landmarks in 5 cities. So it's been a fun journey. And in many ways, totally different than what I was doing in the music industry, and in many ways, very, very similar, in that we're now actually touring in the same way that our bands once toured, and gathering people in the way that we did with concerts, now with meditation and music. So it's been an interesting change, and also interesting parallels.
Yeah, so you've kind of brought that experience from your music industry experience into making this cool, fun, young meditation movement in a sort of a unique way that I've never seen before. It kind of reminds me of the way that, in the past, meditation leaders would set up some kind of infrastructure, like the Buddha set up his community, and even like recently, like Thich Nhat Hanh went around the world setting up these monasteries. They're kind of setting up these like little communities, what you could call like sanghas, and letting it grow like that, and letting it grow organically. I think is really cool. I also really like the idea of how you have it in these iconic locations. Kind of makes it, aside from being an awesome experience for the people that are there, it seems like a really smart marketing move. Like you can put it on Instagram, and it's like, whoa, it's
right.
like automatically grabs your attention. It's did you like sort of conceive that as something that can be like good for marketing? What was the main reason for these iconic locations?
That's a great question. We were really interested in finding places where large groups of people could gather.
I'm just gonna hold this because it's this way. Like I get you front.
Okay, cool.
Which is better.
Do you want me to look into the camera or to you?
To me, it's fine.
Okay.
It's close enough.
It originally started with just looking for large spaces where people could gather, and wanting to do that in spaces that were culturally relevant. Such an important part of what we do is work towards meeting people at the level that they're at. So if people are brand new to meditation or well-being practices, we like to introduce this stuff in a way that welcomes them and allows them to feel inclusive, and doing them at awesome places where you go for music or for art or for transportation or whatever it may be, museums, has proven to be a really great way to sort of blend culture into the experience. And it just so happens that doing it and taking that approach is great for marketing. It's true. It's been a really interesting way to create attention for meditation and to get people to learn about the Big Quiet. Yeah, I gotta film one of these Big Quiets one of these days. I think that would be really cool. Yeah.
And add it to this. So I wanted to know a little bit more about you personally. Like, what was the first meditation style that you tried to use when you were in college? That when you were having those like panic and anxiety attacks, which I can relate to because that's what got me into it in college too.
Okay.
What was your path into it? Did you find like a YouTube video, a book? Like what style did you start with?
Yeah, when I first really started dedicating myself to finding a practice, I found that it was interesting. There weren't really places to go immediately. There weren't places to really talk about mental health challenges, and there weren't any obvious places to go for meditation. And I think that as a man, and within my sort of group of peers and sort of the way I was raised, there wasn't much space to talk about mental health. So it was very much a personal journey, and I went to Google. And the first place I learned to meditate was Shambhala. I did one of the intro courses there and really enjoyed it. And then after 8 months of practicing that regularly, I learned Vedic meditation with a teacher named Light Watkins. And Vedic meditation is what I've been practicing since. And now I teach a style of meditation which is similar to Vedic meditation called the One Giant Mind Being technique.
What is that called?
It's One Giant Mind. One Giant Mind is the organization. The technique is called the One Giant Mind Being technique. Yeah.
I'd love to hear about sort of your experience with the difference between that Shambhala technique that you learned and the Vedic meditation, because to me this is like a fascinating thing about different types of meditation, how they affect people differently. Is a big part of the documentary that we're making.
Cool. Yeah, so I found that with my relatively limited experience around practicing, learning from Shambhala and practicing that technique for about 8 months, I found that it was really great for building inclusive awareness of the present moment, just starting with the way that the body is positioned, the eyes being left open. It was really an enhancement of being fully aware of what's around me and myself. And I found that from a benefit perspective, it was really useful in that I could really apply it to challenges in the present moment and feel a sense of calm and space to respond before reacting, and just would practice and then sort of instantly feel the benefits and move into whatever I was faced with that day with more groundedness and more awareness. When I started practicing Vedic meditation, which is a very different practice, the body sits in a rested position, the eyes are closed, a mantra is used and repeated very gently. That's a Sanskrit word that's kind of creates a vibrational essence. So very, very different technique, very, very different setup with the body. And what I've seen and what a lot of the science shows is that one of the main differences is how restful Vedic meditation or a being technique is. It allows the body to go into a deeply restful state, which is essentially turning off the parasympathetic nervous system, turning on the sympathetic nervous system, and or other way around, turning off the sympathetic nervous system, turning on the parasympathetic nervous system, going from fight or flight to a more relaxed response. And the process of that, when practicing Vedic meditation, involves something that's very restful and oftentimes kind of feels like taking a nap while sitting up. So very different than building complete inclusive awareness in the moment, and more of a restful, deep restful experience. And from a benefits perspective, I found that Vedic meditation, it's not as instant. I found that when I was practicing from Shambhala, that I would finish the meditation and I would sort of like float into my day. And with Vedic meditation, it's been more of a slow build in regards to how stress and anxiety has been getting stripped from my past and allowing me to slowly but surely feel more connected to who I am, as opposed to feeling sort of zen or present in the moment. So I find that they both have incredible benefits and they're both amazing practices, and the one that's resonated with me more has been the Vedic practice. But what I plan to do with time is to start to introduce more of those more mindful-based practices, like what I learned at Shambhala, into my life, and to eventually start practicing both, starting with the being technique and then adding on the a witnessing technique like the Shambhala technique. But that's something that I'll work towards with time.
Yeah, that's something that we've, through the course of this documentary, we've seen sort of these two sort of styles. The first style, I know Shambhala is a secular organization, but I think that those kind of meditations tend to come from the Buddhist traditions. Yeah. Right, and tend to be maybe more breathing oriented, some kind of central focus.
Yeah, oftentimes, yeah.
Yeah, and the Vedic, which comes more from the Hindu traditions.
Right.
They're generally, there's so many different Hindu traditions, but from what it sounds like, you're talking about something sort of like a just being kind of meditation. I kind of wonder, like, I would love to hear maybe a little bit like how our viewers could actually try to sink into one of those types of meditation. Do you think you could maybe do a few minutes of just sort of guiding the viewers into one of those types of meditation, just so they can get a taste for it?
Not in this context. The training that I've done to be able to teach someone a being technique really requires about 3 hour-and-a-half sessions to really understand the technique and to be able to practice it fully and have the support to be able to practice it fully. So there isn't a shortened version of the being technique or a mantra technique that I feel like I could give in a short period of time that would be of service to people. So I'm not able to do that. Unlike something like a mindfulness technique where, noticing your breath. And those are the types of tools that we use at the Big Quiet. We only have about 15-20 minutes for the meditation there. So we actually use mindfulness techniques to bring people into the meditation, as opposed to giving a mantra and providing people with the support to practice a mantra, which we offer through the Big Quiet as a 3-night course.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So the mindfulness techniques that you do in the Big Quiet, it's mainly, you said, like either breathing or body scan?
Yeah. We start with, so what we do is we bring in sound practitioners who use instruments like sound bowls to create vibrational essence that allows the mind and body to settle in the space of lots of people. It also creates a nice soundscape and sort of sound bubble to hold everyone. And then we guide people in with a pretty basic body scan, really just going from head to toe. And then we bring people to notice their breath and their heart space simultaneously. And we call this the rest and expand technique. And it's really simple, it's something that can be guided in a few minutes. And then we have the support of the sound and the sound practitioners to sort of carry people on their path while we have the mass meditation. And then when we bring people out of it, we have a series of musicians, an incredible music director, oftentimes many people on string instruments like violins, to sort of take people from the captive space of meditation into a series of performances.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like you have experience with a lot of different styles of meditation. Do you feel that each one of them gives you like a significantly different suite of benefits?
I really do, yeah. I find that a mindfulness practice, specifically meaning, let's say, noticing different parts of my body, like doing a body scan, or a practice where I may be noticing my breath. Essentially a practice where my focus, I'm actually using focus, bringing a focus to the body, I find creates more awareness in the present moment, and in turn allows me to show up with more of a sense of calm and sort of space between what's happening and how I'm showing up. So I have more of a sense of space to respond as opposed to react to things. And I find that when I'm practicing, and the benefits of that are really beautiful. I find that if I'm in a stressful situation, or maybe an argument's unfolding, to be able to use those techniques, even if it's for 30 seconds, can be really helpful in the moment. What I find with Vedic meditation or with being techniques like One Giant Mind, that the benefits are more foundational, and that I find that as opposed to being able to apply something like a Vedic practice to a challenge I'm having in the moment, my Vedic practice, I've noticed, sort of strips stress, anxiety, stress triggers from my past out of my system, so that it creates almost like more of a long-term foundational shift in how I show up and how I connect with myself and other people. So the benefits there feel more long-term, and they feel more like they start by shifting what I've experienced in the past, sort of clearing and cleaning up what I've experienced in the past to be more clear in the present moment, as opposed to some of these other practices that feel more like meaningful, quick fixes to challenges or stresses that I may feel in the present moment. I find both to be really valuable.
Cool. I've been talking to a lot of different spiritual teachers, and so one thing that fascinates me is that I tend to find that people have different goals when it comes to spirituality. So, some forms of spirituality have no goal, and that's kind of the point of it. But then I've found that some teachers have this goal of, it sort of boils down to like increasing happiness for the self and for the people around. And then others have this goal of truth, like finding truth or union with the universe or some kind of like truth-oriented goal. Do you feel like there's a goal in your practice? Is it toward happiness, toward truth, something else?
In the Vedic tradition, a lot of the teachers talk about connecting with being and becoming established in being, which is essentially having a practice, we practice twice a day, that allows us to connect with that deeper inner sense of self, referred to as being, almost like how we exist without any thoughts, without any stories, just us at our purest essence. And when we practice 20 minutes for twice a day, we're able to tap into that state and bring it into our sort of waking, existing state. And that over the course of practicing more regularly, we start to become more established regularly in a state of being. To me, what that means is becoming more and more clear and connected with who I am, what I stand for, without all the stories and information around my background or my career, other tools or modes that people may use to identify me or myself, but to get really clear about who I am at my purest form and what I'm here to do and how I'm here to serve, and connecting with that state of being. That feels like what I'm developing the more that I practice this. I don't really think of it as a goal, but it does feel like something that's becoming more established as I practice my technique.
Cool. And where do you see yourself going in the future? Where do you see the Big Quiet and Medi Club going? Do you have like a plan for expanding? Do you have an idea of what you want to happen from this?
Yeah, so we're going to continue to tour the Big Quiet and bring our mass meditation experiences to special locations throughout the world. I mentioned this last fall, we toured to 5 cities in the US. Our plan is to expand that tour and to go to more cities this year and to continue to build out that tour. So ideally, we're bringing the Big Quiet experience to some of the most iconic, beautiful spaces in the world and gathering large groups of people to really connect with themselves and each other and to celebrate connection and the arts in meaningful ways. And along the way, to have the Big Quiet brand not only be something that stands for gathering people for good, but also becomes a platform for providing people with tools and courses that allow them to have self-sustained practice and access to knowledge that allows them to really live a life that's more connected to a sense of being, more connected to a sense of purpose, more connected to a sense of how to look out for each other and support each other and serve the great needs of our time. So I see us growing to a place where we're touring in a large-scale capacity and also providing tools that really help people transform their lives for the better.
Cool. Thank you for what you're doing. I think it's a positive force in the world, and I hope that these organizations that you're growing grow larger and create beautiful ripples of consciousness in the world.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that, man.
Thank you. Let's do it.